Cool. So, we had a good question. How do we build out a team of writers? And I've done short videos on this, but not too many walkthroughs on how I do this. So at this point, I've probably screened over 1,000 writers and hired at least 100 and, trained them up. We have 30 today, and it is what it is. We go through them sometimes. So this is my simple process. The ad is just a simple copy paste. I drop it in a few places. What I like to do is I have a little loom. It's got my face on there, but it introduces a bit about this gig, really high level about our service, because most people coming to our team have no idea what it is we do, and I have no problem with that. For your company, I don't know if you need them to know what you do or not. Some people have different feelings on that, but I certainly need them to be, as I say in point one, you've got to be at this level. Like I personally have written for founders with billion-dollar exits and $100 million ARR companies, and so they don't have to be maybe at my level, but they need to be like ready. And I also highlight a couple other things, like your samples better not be totally unrelated. This is shorthand for direct response, which doesn't fit what we do. So maybe they don't need to be a pro at what you do, but they need to have something relevant to share, and it can't be something completely irrelevant. We pay on a piecework plus performance. I think if you paid hourly, you could skip this lengthy explanation of how that works out. But in my experience hiring, you're serving everyone better off if you just say the rate right up front, if it's defined. If you need to negotiate, obviously that is what it is, but you're gonna cut through a lot of questions from candidates you wouldn't have talked to anyway. And whether it's because they're too high or too low, they just want to know the rate before they spend their time applying. So because we do piecework plus performance, I had to give a range and kind of explain the gig a little and then explain it. But that doesn't apply to most gigs, I think. So really, what we're looking for is relevant samples. There's a little quiz. I used to use this as a hard qualifier. Now it's like brownie points. And I'll show you the quiz. And then I let them know, in our case, we're freelance. So I'm like, give us at least this much time when you're ready to start. It doesn't have to be tomorrow, but and I'll just stress a couple like make or break things from the writer's point of view. And I think it's important, since we're talking about writers specifically, having been a content writer for 5 years and freelance my way up, you should really know, like, writers are very happy to send you samples. They're even happy to do a short application, but you'll see later in this, it's really important you start paying for their time at a certain point. So following all this, and I make it clear, is that there's a paid trial for people who are qualified. And that's important to me because I freelanced my way through plenty of unpaid and paid. And I still advocate doing unpaid work when you think it needs to be done to move your way up. But from the hiring point of view, I would say you should be paying for the time. I just had to say that as a freelance writer. But yeah, it's a really simple form. So what's your name? What's your email? Link to some samples. And so when you're hiring a freelance writer, intuitively you'd want to see like, yeah, they have an article on entrepreneur.com, or like they've got an article on this niche relevant domain. I love to see that. Don't get me wrong. But what I love to see more now, having been through the whole spectrum of freelancing and editing and hiring, and I've edited more than 10 million words too before I was a writer, is the raw samples. So I love seeing people's Google Docs, which are very different from the finished product that made it through 3 editors. So if you want to know what kind of writer you're about to work with, how many rounds of revision you're going to have to go through, I love seeing the raw Google Doc sample links. Those ones, like, I'm excited to jump into. I'll be honest, more because I get to be more cutthroat because it's very obvious when they don't work. But this simple quiz I put up, I just asked them to go to extract one defined piece of data from our own website. And so in our case, it's a DR metric, what we average to. It's such an easy thing. It takes 2 seconds, and I told them where to put it. I told them to sneak it in here. And this is literally how simple our screening is. We're still on Google Docs. So I could even link this to a candidate if they're interested, or I just copy paste this somewhere, but it goes to this Google form. They submit the form goes to this sheet. If they got the quiz right, this highlights green, so you can see how few people get it right. So I had to stop using it as a hard cutoff, because probably the first 200 I cut off may have had some good candidates in there. I like attention to detail, but maybe it was a little extreme. So the one field I really love, and I'm sorry to switch back here, but at the bottom, I skipped over it, is the only real custom answer you can give. It almost doesn't matter what the question is, but for a freelance writer specifically, it goes back to what kind of samples you get access to. This is sometimes the only place you get to see their actual writing unpolished. And so let me show you what I mean. Depending on where you post, you're going to get writers. I blocked out their names, which I think was a cool tip, actually, on the note of like diversity, blocking out names so you don't have biases come in. But however you feel about that, I had to do that for this call. You'll see if we can, I don't know if we can blow this up. Maybe? Okay, so you'll see like, let me show a rejected one. So, okay, you can see some stuff pop up right away. So this person wrote, I will always meet the deadline, but if I couldn't due to some unexpected circumstances, I'll inform you ahead. As someone who's edited 10 million words of translated from another language to English, I can tell you right off the bat, it's not a native speaker. I don't have anything against non-native speakers. Like I live in China, I speak a few languages. I could never come up with a sentence this good in another language on paper. But for our gig, where there's no time for editing, I need it to be flawless. Layer on top of that, this in the sample section, this person put, I will, with a smiley face. It's like, I'm sure you would at some point send me samples, but I actually wanted them for the application. So that was a really quick reject. And, you know, that's why I just have this a simple like flip to reject. It's super easy because you get to see stuff. I would quickly update the project manager to reassign it before it's too late. I mean, a double space there, these might seem really nitpicky, but for me, it's super easy to spot. And they're just red flags that I just don't have time. You can see how many rows I'm on this year alone of evaluating. I mean, one last one, really easy to reject. What the hell kind of answer is that? Like I care about taking your pay for being late, for screwing me. Like I'm not going to pay for work that isn't done, but like I can't have late work. And there's not even a period on the end of the sentence, which like you're applying for like a primo level ghostwriting gig. The big sentences have to end in punctuation.
And every day as well. It's like every
day. Like another one, no punctuation. Yeah, little things like that.
Are we just spelling Nazi at the moment?
But it is.
I take your point though, because if you're a writer, it does need to be perfect. Like, and that's, you know, it's just lazy and sloppy if they haven't done that.
It's unfortunate. But I mean, by contrast, you know, I don't even need it to be this lengthy, but at least there's punctuation. At least I got something to work with here. You know, and they give me something like personal, which is nice. So that's why I like that last question. It doesn't really matter what you ask. It's just a chance to see how they actually write. And so the only other place to do that, and I know the spreadsheet's kind of, you're like, what? But if you remember, I asked for samples, right? I asked to see 2 to 3 samples. And so that's what this column represents. And so remember, I told you, like, of course, I love seeing, I don't know, maybe these are good websites or not. I don't know. But where I jump to right away, the people I evaluate first are like, gave me a Google Doc to check out, because I know like this is the raw deal. It's very unlikely they paid for an editor to
Mm.
sit on the Google Doc. And so that's what I'm checking out. But first, my screener is that one question with the custom answer. I'd rather evaluate them on one sentence than
Mm.
some of this stuff. I didn't think to open these beforehand, but do you want to open up one of these and see a quick way to be
Yeah,
ruthless, or you want
yeah,
to keep going?
absolutely. I think this is the kind of thing where it's so second nature to you. You can just go like, yep, reject, yep, accept. But actually talking
All right,
through the reasoning behind it is super interesting.
instant rejection. So this isn't writing for, it's just not internet writing. And I very much admire people who can write books, who can write white papers. And so if you're hiring for something else, maybe this shouldn't be an instant rejection. Or if you have an incredible editor, and I should have said that sooner, and I'm sorry about that. Back to the ESL thing, the English second language
Mm.
topic. There are amazing English second language writers out there, and I know several, and they are fantastic. We actually have several on our team, but their English is so perfect you
Mm.
would never know. But they're amazing ESL writers who their English isn't perfect, but they are subject matter experts. Like they are SMEs that you want in your team. You just need a good copy editor. That's all. And a lot of them work with good copy editors they could bring with you because they know it, and that's not a bad thing. But this person, before we even waste any time looking at each sentence, the structure is off. The structure is all off. They gave paragraphs, but there's not a line space in between each one. There's 2 line spaces here where there's 1 line space here. Like you said, it's second nature at this point, but these are the things that I'm rattling off in my head is like, why are there 2 line spaces? Why is there only 1 line space? Why are there 2 line spaces? There should only be 1 line space, but why is it uneven? Why are there no line spaces? That doesn't make any sense. Why is there only like 1 paragraph break and 17 sentences? It's just bad. It's just bad practice.
So you're looking for like this. You're looking for this to be a polished professional piece of writing, and any mistakes here, yeah, in terms of structure, in terms of
For me, it's
yeah.
just bam, rejected app,
Yep.
rejected.
Yep.
For me, it's faster to just reject right away, and then I go back and look at the gaps really closely.
Mm.
And so, here's somebody who didn't trial. And I guess I don't have access to that anymore. So for whatever reason, we weren't good enough for them, or maybe we went to spam the invitation. And so let's see. Their initial was, their initial was, it's kind of iffy, honestly. It's kind of iffy. But I guess something in here swung me over. Larry Davidson, the name is iffy as it is. It seems fake, but it's tough when you get to this level because, sorry about their pop-up. It's a perfect internet article for whatever the stockdork.com is. But at this point, they've already had an editor. I don't really know much besides the writer's good enough to get freelance gigs at this level. They're good enough to write stuff about the stock market. It's still worth reading line by line for a little bit here and there, because sometimes it's still so choppy you can tell, like no editor could even save them. But usually at this point, you're spending your time reading an article and going, but you don't know anything more about them. So I guess the caveat there is if they're writing an article really relevant to your niche, the editor's probably not giving them all the data, at least. So they probably did that homework. But again, it's so tough because who's to say the stock dork didn't give that guy a brief filled with resource links and everything? I mean, I've run a content agency, I've been a freelance. It's just so hard to know how much they've got. I'm not at all saying I only hire people who give me raw stuff, not by any means. If you see, Medium's kind of like Google Docs, but if you see them on decent sites, it is an indicator they're a decent writer, definitely. So you just need to know what's for your, like this person, Oh, okay. I was gonna say they're on the Dropbox blog, like they're a winner, but that's just the
Yeah.
Dropbox.
Uh, you
But
touched on something before about the editor. So how does, for anyone who hasn't really hired writers before, how do you get an editor involved? Like how do the pieces kind of fit together there?
yeah, and so it depends on your organizational structure there. Do you have like a marketing manager IDing, setting up briefs for the writer? Or are you telling your writer like, look, this is our product and this is the avatar we developed, like can you help us come up? Or maybe you've got an SEO consultant who gave you some keywords that the guy or gal needs to shove in there. um, or or maybe you've got an editor that's not like a proofreader but is like an editor in chief. So I guess let's choose like a middle ground. Let's say you've got a kind of brief, you've got a topic at least. Um, and I would be looking for writers who can take that topic and run with it, do their own research, come up with their own resource material that's neutral, agnostic, and do their best at positioning your internal links within the article. At that point, you're looking for what we call a proofreader or what we call a copy editor. At the highest, you're looking for what we call a line editor. So they're literally going line by line and making sure it's cohesive, and then
Mm,
down to proofreader level, which is punctuation. Copy edit's kind of like grammar, syntax. Um, but if you need the marketing manager or the editor in chief, that's what we call like substantive editing. And so these are different pay grades you need to
mm,
think about if you're going to get an editor. And substantive, you don't want them coming in after the writer has written the whole article. You want them more on the outline level, review
mm,
the outline and make sure the flow is good. Proofreader is at the end, but at that point it's too late. Or if you really want to burn bridges with your freelance writer, it's just too late to change direction. Like
mm,
to use a jolly metaphor, the ship has sailed. Like it's the course is set for that piece. So all you're doing here is you're tweaking a little bit, polishing it. So you need to decide for your structure, do you have someone capable of setting the direction, the overall strategy for your content and then briefs for each piece? Or are you trusting the writer with that? Can you trust them with that? At that point, you only need a proofreader. In an ideal world, you can find a writer who, even if they can't do the SEO or the brand strategy of the briefs, they can at least give you an article that's polished enough for just a proofreader to finish off. Uh, and being real with you, we, our service is different than what you need in house, because you're not doing a media pitching service. We need people to do as polished as possible. We have no time for editing. They hit send. We come in after the fact to coach them, but not revisions on pitches.
mm,
Um, so we need the top of the top, but you're never going to get a writer that can create an article with no typos, no like two thes next to each other by accident. We're just, when we're in the flow, like they're jamming, and then afterwards, you've seen it yourself, whether you write code or anything, you can't spot your own errors. So if you really want a polished look, you want a proofreader, and they're cheap. I don't know the going rate today. I did it 6 years ago, but they're like penny a word or maybe 3 cents a word. They're cheap. So and you can get them on bulk deals too, where you're like, look, I'm going to be creating 20,000 words a month. Can you help me out here?
mm.
So
Does the English as a second language thing, does that matter as much for a proofreader? Like, would you still go with like the need to be a
oh,
native English speaker on that one, or is that not so
I
important?
would for comfort zone, but where you could really, if you're thinking about for saving on overhead, where you could really save is on the writer. You could get yourself an amazing subject matter expert writer, and I could list them off names off the top of my head for certain niches that I
Mm,
know. Uh, they create wonderful content, really research backed, and they'd be much cheaper because they live in Middle East, North Africa, or they live in South Asia, and or they live in Latin America and they just need that proofreader for pennies on the back end, versus US born and bred, and they're an amazing writer too, but they cost 3 to 4 times for the same piece of content.
Right.
That's where I'd go. I'd have your last person for sure be, and we're just talking about English language content. And I guess it's important to note between us, because we come from different English backgrounds, like you should think about who your audience is. You know, we got the Z thing going on. You know, you got to think about that kind of stuff.
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay. And okay. So we've covered how you hire the writers, the job description, the screening process.
Yeah. That was a little ruthless. Let's go to the feel good part. Is that where you were going?
Yeah. Well, and also the I don't know if you've got anything on how you manage them, or how you work with them, how you interact with them, how you you mentioned some coaching before. I don't know like how that kind of fits into the process, but yeah.
I was going, we can skip this. I was going to go over like what's the trial like and what's the onboarding like, but we could skip that and just talk about coaching if you'd like.
If you've got time to do it all, let's do it all.
Okay. Well, yeah. This is my new format for onboarding. So the trial, I like to be really clear, you know, and again, going paid trial, always paid, give it a pay. And then, you know, you can use the piece if it's good or scrap it if it's not. We don't even ever use these anymore because it's a minimal paid trial. But what I like to do is do some short Loom videos going over these criteria. If anybody sees a wall of text, it's like an instant like brain off. And so then I give them literally some examples of what we think are amazing. So even if you have no content on your site, I'm sure you've read an article or two of a competitor's and you're like, this is the kind of stuff I want. Like, just so you know, when you do the paid trial for me, like I want something that looks like this if you're capable of it. And then we get super explicit about how is our pay structure working at our company, you know, line by line, like this is how it works. And also like some of the deal breakers for the writer, and for you that might include things like I expect up to 3 revisions, or you know, things that are part of the freelance writer relationship. You may want to be clear about, like, I don't pay for work that doesn't hit this criteria, or I can pay for work, something like that. You know, you want it to be not mean or off-putting, but honest about what the nature of the gig is going to be. And finally, we have a link to the paid trial. And I think we can skip that because that's very service specific, but it's really basic. It's a minimal commitment. It's like an hour of their time at tops that we're paying for. We're just trying to get a read on this, right? And then we're evaluating those, and that's maybe too service specific, but our onboarding, you'll see, kind of mimics that. It used to be one giant wall of text. Oh, somebody's onboarding. You can, from a freelance writer, when I ran a content agency, we used to have like a 25-page content guidelines. Nobody ever reads that. Like nobody, they're freelancers. They care, but they can't care that much. So this is probably the biggest wall of text, which is to explain our Airtable, and thank goodness soon it'll be gone when Sorcery's here, but in the longest video, but we try to keep each video to like 2 to 4 minutes. Really important stuff. Think of it as the content guidelines, you know, the big thick book, but these are each category, right? You know, we got an actual text checklist for certain things that they'd want to know. But here's the other biggest one, like the never do this, please. Never plagiarize, that kind of stuff. But you know, really short videos that are just explaining how to do the gig piece by piece, literally like how to use our CMS, how to ask for more work, how to file your pay form. And so this is what I highly recommend. I've seen this elsewhere. Going back to our lead gen talk with Lead Cookie, this was their onboarding for the clients. And we were like, wow, amazing. We should do this for our clients, to be quite frank. It's really cool because it's now like a 45-minute endeavor, but they can digest it in bits and pieces. It's a reference doc they can go back to instead of a big thing they never want to flip through. And so that's what we do. And so I guess it's a good segue into our coaching. You may be hiring a writer and you've never written yourself. That's tough. I just want to sympathize. That's really tough because I've worked with a lot of clients who've never worked with a writer, and we're both doing our best to serve each other. And we both know there's an end goal, and sometimes you both know you're not hitting it as well. And it's not frustrating between each other. It's just internally frustrating because you want it. So it's hard because I don't know your bottom lines, but if you can afford it, I would look for a proven content marketer. If you're like looking for someone to head your blog strategy, as somebody who has developed blog strategies without being a blog strategist, that's why my content agency failed. That's why we stayed in mid-tier. We didn't have the strategy. We didn't have the SEO, and we didn't have the content marketing.
Right.
So, it's really tough for me to advise that to you because in our former business, we could never have afforded that person. I know what it's asking. So it is what it is. But if you can afford that editor-in-chief or that SEO consultant at the minimum, or a content marketer who can do both SEO and branding, that's what you want, is someone who can lead from above with that. But that being said, I think there's some fun stuff you can do. Like when you get into a team environment like ours, I ask our best performing writers once a week to share their best tips. And again, these are relevant to our service, so we don't really need to dive into them. But it's just a chance for other writers, you can see all the emoji reactions, to learn from them. And so we've got all the tips here, like they're loving eating up these tactics. And so these might not be necessarily relevant for a long form blog, but who knows? If you give a team environment, maybe your writers might enjoy learning from each other on like their best research tips. And certainly if you have that editor-in-chief, like big sister, big brother kind of relationship, coaching up a freelancer, I mean, I can tell you, many freelancers will accept a lower pay if they know they're working with a pro and about to pick up a new skill, whether it's on the data analytics side or the SEO side or the content marketing side. It means a lot to us working our way up, because then we know the next gig we get to charge more.
Right.
So if you can offer anything like this team supportive environment where people are learning as they go, that matters a lot. And so, this is writers supporting writers, but we actually have ratio on our team, like one coach for every 10 writers. So the coach comes from internally, and they're a proven writer. Like I said, our head coach converts as well as I do for our service. So he's the head coach. We've got a couple others, like from our first tip, Amy has a couple cameos in here. She's really amazing, and she's not the best converting, but she says, like, look, I'm not the speed demon. I'm not the converting one, but I can get in the highest DR sites, which for our model means you get the highest pay. So she's giving tips to the writers on, like, because everyone sees her. If you've got more than one writer in your team, they're going to check out the other writers' published posts on your site and see, like, how's this person doing it. So that's the combination we have. We have direct coaching. Feedback's critical. I guess to finesse your coaching, revisions is a tricky thing for freelance writers. That's why I suggested in your application material to be clear about up to how many you'd request. And then, because you have to remember they're not getting paid for their time. But feedback is different from revisions. And so we use our coaches not to say you need to do this over, but to say, next time you'll have less revision requests if you could nail this. And that's the point of revisions, is over time we get better. So that's how we use feedback, since we can't do revisions in our work. But that's how I would use revisions. If you were building an in-house team, it's always to improve. It's not to drag more out of, like, eke a little more value out of that post, you're trying to get them to be a more valuable team player over
Mm.
time. That's the point of coaching from my point of view. That
Fantastic.
was a little nebulous, though. Well, I'm
Yeah,
sure you have
yeah.
questions after that.
No, that was great. One final question on this. Do you, and maybe it's different because of the nature of the writers that you're hiring, and because it's very Harrow specific. Would you separate the kind of the research role versus the writing role? So, for example, if you had to write, say, a blog post, and you needed to find like a graph or some statistics, or some examples of websites that were really well designed or something like that, and you needed someone to do that piece of research, do you get the writer to do it, or do you have a separate person whose job it is to just find stuff?
Yeah, I mean, for getting us our service
Mm,
for like a real content, like long form content, I it depends on what level of expertise that writer has demonstrated to you. For most interactions with freelance writers, the best practice is to send them a developed brief with,
mm,
at minimum, a title. Even better, the headers defined, like H2s. So that means like the subtopics defined, and often with a few resource links. You're like, look, these are what I consider to be good resources on the subject. You're welcome to do outside research, but I would use this material here, because that way you're giving them guardrails that they can't go
right.
wildly outside your expectations. And then the first revision request is like, I did not ask for this article. I wanted this article. I'm not sure what happened here.
Right.
But if you trust the writer, I mean, if they've demonstrated, and certainly if you guys have worked together, that's the dream. The dream over time, my content agency, I forget how many thousands of articles we did, but like once you develop like a cadence
Mm,
or a workflow with a writer, and it also depends, like new clients. So we were an agency, but once you develop that relationship with the writer, over time, you could expect that. You could definitely be like, look, hey, did you see this news event? And they'll be like, oh, I'm on it. And all you need to do is say a sentence. And who knows? In an ideal world, maybe they'll do the topic ideation themselves. At that point, you should expect the writer to approach you
mm.
to be paid to be your content strategist, because if they're doing your strategy, it's another gig.
Absolutely. Fantastic. Listen, thank you so much for that, Greg. There's so much in this. This is really, really, really valuable. This is
My
what are we? I
pleasure.
think we're nearly double the time that we thought it would take.
Hey, you're
This
the
is
one
just
staying up
phenomenal.
late. I
Yeah,
really appreciate that.
I did want to, yeah, I did want to end things early because there's so much value in this. This is really good. Really quick, just before we wrap things up. So if anyone is so on Sorcery, when that's ready to go, let me know and I'll stick a link around and let the world
Thanks. I
know.
appreciate that.
On Jolly SEO. So if anyone is interested in using that or finding out a bit more about it, what's the next step?
I mean, since we're screen sharing, come check us out. This page, if it ever loaded, which hopefully loads faster for you, I think it's a really good starting point because we don't have a filter here. This is literally our live 10 latest billable wins. So you can see what kind of things we're working on for our clients. And there's a little 2-minute video, jollyseo.co or not .com. You can also reach me on LinkedIn. I'm Greg Heilers, my partner Morgan Taylor. And we're happy for you to book a call or just send some messages, or you can email me. I'm greg@jollyseo.co. We're just happy to be quite frank, to be where we're at. We feel really good. We'll be here a while, so take your time. And again, Haro, it's great for the DIY. If you're gonna DIY it, I'd say go for it and don't give up early. You gotta send at least 50 pitches before you give up. Serious delay, and it's a patience game, but we'll be here if you want to work with us. So thank you very much.
Fantastic. Um, Awesome. All right. I might stop the recording there for just a moment.